Good evening. I am David Gradwell. On behalf of the Richard Thompson Memorial Lecture Committee, I want to welcome you to the 2008 Richard Thompson Memorial Lecture. The presentation this evening is the 35th in a series of annual lectures dedicated to the memory of Richard W. Thompson. The Richard Thompson Memorial Lecture Committee wants to gratefully acknowledge the Thompson family's continuing interest and contributions to Iowa State University and their concern for the well-being of American Indian students on campus. We express condolences to the Thompson family for the unexpected passing of Rick's mother, Marge, in January. This evening's presentation honors her life also. Let us reflect a moment on the man in whose honor we gather this evening. Rick Thompson was born at Glen Falls, New York, on April 19, 1949. He grew up in Kansas City and came to Ames to attend Iowa State University. During his residence in Ames, Rick served as the clerk of the Ames Friends meeting. As a 20-year-old, Rick was respected as a leader of both the young and the old. While at ISU, Rick was a member of the Cyclone Aids, Cardinal Key, and the University Lectures Committee. He graduated in 1971 with majors in anthropology and geology. Rick was on the National Affairs Institute Committee and chaired the first American Indian Symposium in 1971. Outcomes of that symposium included the formation of UNASA, the United Native American Student Association, and several years later, the American Indian Studies program at Iowa State University. After graduation, Rick worked in Washington, D.C. with the Friends Committee on National Legislation in Indian Affairs. As a Quaker, Rick was opposed to the war in Vietnam, but he went to Vietnam as a volunteer civilian worker at the Quang Ngai Hospital. In pursuit of his duties there, he met a tragic and untimely death in an airplane crash on November 17, 1973. Rick Thompson's life was dedicated to the attainment of human rights for American Indians and all human beings. His example epitomizes the dedication to purpose and action necessary to attain those goals. His exemplary spirit continues to inspire and motivate us today as we continue the struggle to recognize and maintain human diversity on campus, in our nation, and throughout the world. This evening is a special occasion for me personally. Rick Thompson was an advisee and student early in my career at Iowa State University. Our speaker this evening was one of my last students before my retirement. I am very proud of both of these young men. This evening's speaker joins a long list of distinguished men and women listed on the insert in your program. Introducing the 2008 Richard Thompson Memorial Lecturer is Alexandra Volker. Alex is a member of the Cherokee Tribe, Eastern Band. She grew up in Detroit, Michigan. A senior at ISU, Alex is majoring in biology and history. She is president of the United Native American Student Association. Please join me in welcoming Alex to the podium.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize tonight's sponsors. This event was organized and sponsored by the Native student groups on campus, UNASA, the United Native American Student Association, ACES, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and ARROW, the American Indian Rights Organization. And I'd like to let everyone know that if you're interested in these groups, we have a sign-up sheet over on the table, so once we're done, you can put down your contact info, and we'll be able to get in touch with you and let you know what we're up to. I'd also like to thank the following groups for their funding and assistance: the Committee on Lectures, which is funded by the GSB, the Departments of Anthropology and Landscape Architecture, the American Indian Studies Program, the College of Design, David and Hannah Gradwell, and the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences through the Miller Lecturer Fund. Now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, a member of the Iowa Nation of Kansas and Nebraska. He is a traditional storyteller, artist, teacher, and scholar, and is involved in the cultural preservation and management of the Iowa culture and language. Lance graduated from ISU with an MA in anthropology and a master's in landscape architecture. Since his graduation, he has held cultural resource management specialist positions with the National Park Service in New Mexico and Alaska. He has also managed the Department of Hawaiian Homelands in Honolulu under the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. He's also managed the content for the Iowa website and is a contributor to The Worlds Between Two Rivers, Perspectives on American Indians in Iowa, Native Americans in the 20th Century, an encyclopedia, and Ancient Muses, Archaeology and the Arts. He currently lives with his family in Helena, Montana. So please help me welcome Lance Foster, the 2008 Richard Thompson Memorial Lecturer, for his talk on Emerging from Obscurity, the Iowa Nation in the New Millennium.
It's really so weird, to be here. I was, in your shoes about 15 years ago. And I think about all those people that came before, and would like to, for people, just to stand for a minute. Because as, I'll tell you why. I have an uncle who's Cheyenne. Herman Bear comes out, and he said when he was young, he used to do what he wanted to do. He'd run everywhere, do what he wanted to do, get in trouble. And the old people used to say, sit with us, listen to what we're doing. Someday you're going to be here. Someday you're going to be sitting here where we are, and we won't be here to help you. And he said, oh, you'll be here. I got time. And all of a sudden he woke up, and he's 60-something years old. And they're gone. And he thinks about the things he should have listened to, the things he could have listened to. And, we're so impoverished from where we were before, all of us, from what people did and knew. And so I know in a traditional way I should try to open with a prayer, a small prayer. As imperfect and small as I'm able to do, I would like to try to do that with you tonight. Hintuga Wakanda, Yukunyamaya, Winat Undata, Broge, Winat Undata. I'd like us to pray for this man and for his family who've suffered another loss this year. We're here gathered in his memory. We're gathered for all the people that can't be here. I'm glad you're all here, and may everyone drive safely back home tonight. Be careful. It's a dark night. It's icy. And please, God, watch over us and give the wisdom that we need to live each day. Oh. In the beginning, the Son had a son, an outrageous son, this son of a son. This boy's name was Ishchinki. This boy was very naughty and liked nothing better than to make trouble. But his father, the son, loved him and always backed him up. One morning, Ishchinki woke up before his father did. Impatiently, Ishchinki took a stick and poked at his father to wake him up. The old man still slept on. Then Ishchinki lifted his father's covers and saw his nakedness and laughed. And then the son woke up. When the son saw his son and Stinky sitting there, laughing at him, he grew very angry. And he grabbed this boy by his arm and kicked him hard, so hard the youth fell down, down, down. Emergence. From under the ground, digging upwards, the black bear came, and he brought a sacred pipe. The wolf came and brought the use of the bow and arrow. The elk came and brought the sacred fire. The eagle and the pigeon came from the sky world, and flying down they perched on a cedar tree. They brought a war club, and they could bring rain. They sang, "On what tree have I alighted? To what land have I come?" The buffalo also came from above, they say, and brought the corn. And when these clans met, they fought at first. Many of them died, and each clan believed the land to be theirs. But after many, many died, they saw this was wrong. The eagle said, "You have killed one another to your satisfaction. Let there be an end to this." And then they learned each had a gift that the others did not possess. While they all shared what they had, each clan had its own sacred right. The bear clan served as tribal policemen and civil government leaders. Only the elk could light and care for the sacred fire. No one could plant the corn until the buffalo clan had done so. The wolf clan led the tribal buffalo hunt and scouted the enemy. The eagle clan led in time of war and could bring the rain. Thus each clan had a special role that was needed by all and could be done by no other clan. This formed the interdependence of the tribe. So they adopted each other as brothers and as sisters. They gave each other special names to mark this new relationship. They agreed the earth clans would lead the people for half the year, fall and winter, while the sky clans would lead the people for the other half of the year, spring and summer. At a place called Red Banks, the clans built a great palisaded village, and though each was strong, together they were even stronger. And they smoked the pipe and became brothers and sisters, and the animals they were became human beings, the first Iowas. Now, as a tribe, the Iowa came into being in Iowa. Ancestral stories agree we were always moving about from place to place as commanded by the Creator. As long as we would move, we would live, we would be healthy, and when we stopped moving, we would die. Some clan stories say they originally came from the Great Lakes at a place called Mashuje, Red Banks or Red Earth. Others' stories say some of the clans always lived here. We may never know. Archaeologists identify the pre-contact Iowa with an archaeological culture called the Oneota, identified by certain kinds of pottery at sites dating from about AD 900 to 1750, scattered along the major rivers of Iowa. But that was during the time that the Iowa had already formed a tribal identity as the Iowa. What about before that, before AD 900, when the clans were different peoples entirely? Some, like the wolf, speaking different languages that the others could not understand. These clans were different enough to see each other as a threat, and they warred among themselves until death had worn them out, and finally they made peace. This was a time when only the wolf clan had a bow, and only the buffalo clan had corn, not the others. Corn agriculture and the bow were introduced in the Midwest during the woodland period, 1000 BC to AD 1000. So these clan stories date from at least the woodland period, 3,000 to 1,000 years ago, and in some aspects of the legends, perhaps even earlier. In any case, the Iowas were known as a distinct tribe living in Iowa from before the time of the earliest French explorers of the Mississippi River in the early 1600s until they were ejected from their Iowa homelands through a series of forced treaties with the United States between 1815 and 1836. In contrast, the better-known tribes of Iowa, the Dakota and Meskwaki, had occupied Iowa starting in the early 1700s. the Dakota pushed from the Mille Lacs area of Minnesota by the Ojibwe, and the Meskwaki seeking refuge in eastern Iowa from their persecution across the Mississippi. The Iowas were exiled from their Iowa homelands since before the coming of the first settlers to Iowa. By the time of the opening of Iowa to American settlers, the Iowas as a tribe had been removed to a new reservation across the Missouri River along the border of Kansas and Nebraska. The only Indians then that the white newcomers to Iowa knew about were the Dakota, the Sioux, who lived to the northwest and who were part of the hostilities of 1856 and 1862, and the Meskwaki returned to buy lands near Tama in 1857. No one had any idea who the Iowa were, and so stories began to spring up as to the meaning of the word, beautiful land, this is the place. The Iowa lived in Kansas until the Civil War, and new demands for land by white settlers in Kansas. Frustrated, about half the tribe decided to go live in Indian Territory, down by their old friends, the Saco Blackhawks Band and the Oto. In less than one generation, those lands down there were divided up as well. From after the division of the Iowas into the northern group of Kansas and Nebraska and the southern group of Oklahoma, it was a time of gradual loss of the old culture, the language and outmarriage into non-Indian and other tribes. It always amazes me when people expect us Iowas to look and live like the Iowas of 200 years ago. Do people from this culture still look like George Washington or drive a wagon? Culture is not a static thing. Its survival depends on active practice and the usefulness of the old ways. People can't even make the old elm bark lodges because elm bark was flexible, because we can't find enough elms left because of the Dutch elm disease. The old ways of the Iowa depended on cycles of hunting, destroyed by loss of the buffalo and of restriction to a small piece of land, farming, destroyed by switch to cash crops and to men's control rather than women's, the complex network of hereditary clan rights and responsibilities destroyed by the new imposed governmental systems of agents and then corporation-style governments of tribal chairmen and the like. Beliefs destroyed by the new religions, government policies, and the ridicule of a materialistic worldview. And language, each A, is tied into all these. The school systems punish the students for speaking the language, and so at home, the parents who had been students who had been punished did not teach the active use of the language because all that did was bring pain and shame in school. Our language is currently on life support with only a couple of very dedicated and very exhausted nurses at the bedside. Unfortunately, it seems that many tribal governments have other priorities, ka-ching, than language and culture, the things that are the life's blood of tribal identity. There's little good I can say there, so I will reserve comment. Pain. People say that acknowledging and expressing pain will help it heal. Maybe sometimes it works that way, but not always. We know there's pain, but replaying pain over and over does not seem to heal anything. All you do is keep picking at your scab that never seems to heal. It keeps an infection going. It never becomes a scar that you can look at and remember and be very proud that you survived what made the scar. You really have to clean out the wound once and for all, and then you have to let it be. You will always have a scar there, a memory, a mark, but the sickness will be gone. With the return of the Iowas into the life of Iowa over the last 20 years, people begin to wonder what it means. For the Iowas, yes, but also for Iowans. When the Iowa film premiered in Des Moines in the fall of 2007, and during the public discussion afterwards, one question came out that made all of us Iowas look at each other. We did not know what to answer. The question was, next what? What do the Iowas want now? What is the next step in this reconnection? I don't have the answers, but I do offer the following. What do we want? We want to visit our Sage, our ancestors. Nameless, they were evicted from the earth that merged with them after their deaths. Like an M&M popped out of a cookie, but the red stain in the dough is still there. And now the Sage are hidden away by strangers, and their own children cannot visit them. And yet the strangers know where they are. The Sage are lonely, and they cry. We hear their cries, but we cannot find them. They are hidden from us. We hear their cries, hungry ghosts. Do the strangers hear their cries of hunger and loneliness at night in their beds as they sleep? Let us know where their graves are so we can feed our Sage. What do we want? When Sun pushed his son, the trickster, from the above world, because Trickster laughed at his father's nakedness, Trickster landed on the banks of Nitanga, the Mississippi, and he fell so hard on a great rock, he left the impression of his buttocks. We say, shinje. There's a word for you in Iowa, shinje. And his hands and feet where he landed. Where is this rock with its imprints? When a herd of buffalo went up to the above world, they left a pile of their manure like a tower of stone behind them to mark the spot of their departure. Where is this tower of stone? When a herd of buffalo traveled a deep and narrow canyon, so narrow it was, it scraped their sides and left the canyon walls red-streaked with their blood. Where is this canyon? There are many such places in our stories we would like to find and visit, but it has been so long. We do not know where they are. Can they be found? Remember, review your covenants with this land. What is your relationship with the place that you live on? The place that gives you water, ni, food, waruje, air that you breathe, that gives you life. You think about that. You're alive. Renew your covenants with the land. A covenant is a two-way obligation, a promised relationship. Indigenous people have this in common. Your ancestors from ancient times, ours from recent times, all indigenous people have this. A way of life that rests on three things. Covenant with the Creator, covenant with one's ancestors, covenant with the land. Review your covenants and renew them. And if you have no covenants, ask yourself why you did not, and correct that situation. With the coming changes to our Mother Earth, Hinamaya, we will not all survive. We are not going to all survive. When we get sick, we have a fever, and the fever burns the sickness. The Earth is developing a fever. Whether this is humanity's doing, a natural cycle, or a combination of human and nature, doesn't matter. Changes are not only coming, changes are already here. It is all connected. Food, fuel, transportation, growing seasons, business, jobs, the basics. So many focus their attention on energy, more oil, biofuel, alternative energy, on going green. That's good, but there's another side. There's a social side, not just the technological side. Remember, when there is change, there is stress. People don't like change. People get ugly. We may not be able to prepare for all these changes because we don't know what they will all be. We do need to prepare our relationships with each other, our ability to deal with the social stress that is coming. The Ioways came into being after a period of such great stress, of wars between clans when many people died. And as the clans learned how to come together, we will too in the future world of our making. We are the ancestors of the future. Or we will fight, and there will be death until we are forced to come together in the end anyway, whoever of us is left. We are going to be forced to change. Now it is a matter of how we are going to survive it. The Ioways had to change. Perhaps to a degree we would be unrecognizable to our ancestors. Like speckled corn on the same cob, the tribe. We have a few red kernels, a few blue ones, some yellow ones, and many, many pale ones. But it is still the same corn cob. But then the stories say we were always changing. We changed from the clan animals to human beings. We changed from the people of Red Banks to the Ioways, Winnebagos, and others. We changed from a free people to prisoners, from buffalo hunters to computer jockeys. In this race-conscious world, are we red or are we white? Whatever we are, bear or human, red or white, we are still Iowa. Creation was never an event that just happened once in the long ago past. Creation didn't happen just once. Creation, even now, is still unfolding. Time is just another dimension of the material world, like breadth, width, and height. The spirit has no time, because the spirit is not material in nature. And the Iowa spirit is not restricted by time. It lives on forever, wed to this land between two rivers. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these drawings and what they are. You can go to manual and I'll just kind of signal. You can start anywhere, it doesn't matter. This is a piece called Only Stories. And they're telling the story inside their lodge, the Chakiwa. And in...
Now it wouldn't work before. Now it wants to work.
They're telling stories. We only told stories in the winter. I told you the beginning of a story about the sun and his jinky. Luckily it's still winter, but it confused me because I heard thunder, so I thought it was safe. But anyway, these folks, you can see down there one of the pots that the Oneota people made and some of the hide work. And these people are talking about a story, a prophecy of people coming who will be different from the past and the clans and then becoming human beings at the top. To the people, the long knives, Mahikanye, and then the airplanes, and then who knows how it all connects at the end. But people are just amazed at these stories about what's supposed to happen, and indeed, are they only stories? Well, we found out they are not only stories. This is a buffalo hunt, and traditionally people wore the wolf skins to come up. We had a story, one of my ancestors, Mahaska, had a white wolf skin that when he wore it and sang certain songs, he could become invisible. Well, you know, with you got a buffalo like that coming at you, which is also one of our names, Mahaga, which is bristling with arrows, one of our ancestor names, you definitely have to worry about becoming invisible. But there's some other symbols and things in there you probably recognize, but go ahead. I'm in the middle of actually, I've done a book about the tribes of Iowa, and some of these are illustrations for that. People often forget how important women were, you know, to continue the tribe, to make sure that the men were kind of somewhat expendable. It was the women who were important, because the women carried the tribe. And so this is just Hina. Hina means mother. And that's one of the old-time scapular hose that they used. I did this for David Gradwell, thing he was doing, and this was one of the seasons during the flood season during the summer, and there's some of the animals that live under the water, and Iyunke up there, the fork-tailed kite that you don't see here anymore. But the men used to travel in huge dugouts made from cottonwoods and other trees that sometimes were up to 50 feet long, and it would have been amazing to see those. This is, in the wintertime, the men would go out and they use these sticks to pry open the beaver lodges to get to the beaver. The beaver symbol is, they actually found a pipestone object that was carved like that. And you can see, even though it's snow, and Munjit Awe is the word for February, when the bears jump from the trees. And he's got this mesh bag and everything. He's going out in his snowshoes. And you see the little snow plow up there, kind of going around it. So this kind of connects past and future. Maya Pihi, making peace. That means peace. Maya is the earth. Ma is like the soil. Ya is to lay out flat, to be distributed flatly. Pi is good, to make the earth good. He is causative. It means to cause something. So by making the earth good, that is how we talked about making peace. And this was, so when the people of the woodlands met the people of the plains, sometimes they would argue and fight over resources. And this is one of the times when they came together under the sycamore. Now, you notice you've heard the saying, burying the hatchet? Well, they actually did do that sometimes, and red, symbol of war, and white, the symbol of peace. That's why the sycamore was known as the tree of peace. This is an area of one of the villages, the China. Chi is what we call the lodges. You may have heard teepee. Well, teepee is a plural for T is the lodge itself in Dakota and Lakota. And so you can see the root word, the similarities between T and Chi. And the waterways, they usually put the villages down by the waterways. When you see those kind of wavy lines, that's like a connection of power between the place and whatever it's connecting. You'll see it above people's heads when they're holy in old-time ledger drawings. And underneath, our word for the underwater beings, the underwater panther, was Ishchehi, the mouth that is dangerous. Doctoring, washswehi, to make someone well, is what that means. And people would go out into the woods. The women were a big part of the herb doctoring. They kind of led in that. And Mankonke, the owl, there were different kinds of owls. Hinda was the horned owl, and that was the one that could be something bad in that form. But Mankonke was one of our clan owls, the spotted owl. And this is a woman going out there getting roots for what she needs to do to help somebody. And the bear, of course, the paws are about the herbs, because the bear a lot of time was the one who knew what herbs would heal you. You may have seen this one quite a bit. A color version was on Lynn Alex's Archaeological Past of Iowa. Makanye means to dig the earth. And this was the summer work, the spring work, to dig the earth, to make the corn in the hills grow. And the mountains also being like human beings, the Mother Earth and the growth that comes out of that. And just like you saw the snowplow, well, those are John Deere tractors, you know. And the triangles being representative of the corn seeds, you know. So this one's called Iowa Fall Powwow. And today people dress more like on the left, the women and men. But it's the people from long ago leading it that they're really following in their footsteps. That's what they call a straight dancer. That's more southern style, since the folks kept more of the ways traditional down there. And the one leading that flag, that's the Iowa flag made out of crow feathers and swan feathers. And we still have our fall powwows, both. The ones in the south, they usually do it in the summer. We have it in the fall up north. This is Trickster. Ishchinki, the one who's the clown, who can cure madness, who's good, who's bad, who shows the limit of behavior that's acceptable. But we had other forms of Trickster. The one that's around, that's Ishchinki with the raccoon tails on his robe. But also, a Mishchinye, the rabbit, was another one, like Brer Rabbit, you may have heard that. And Manikati, the one who goes around on foot, coyote, was another one. They all kind of had different flavors to them as far as their behavior as tricksters. Wakanda Warigrohi, thank you, God. This is a man encountering the thunder, encountering that connection between the sky and there, and all the stones are living people. And you can see the power of the earth, the corners of the earth connecting to the man. So he's kind of connecting the sky and the below world too. This one's called Ranue Wakonita, which is the sacred pipe. And this is like a stained glass window kind of format that, since the pipe was really the expression of how we prayed, and the smoke connected our breath, our praying to God that rose to the sky. The pipe was that instrument. Some folks looked at the bowl. We looked at the stem as being the most sacred part of the pipes. That's why we decorated it in different ways. And of course, the war club, there were different forms. Some were connected with one clan or the other, the ball-headed war club. This one was more with the Bear Clan. You can see the claws on it as well. It got elaborated later on when they got metal blades and things. Now, this is an interesting story, and this is going to be one of those kind of little strange things that sounds like it may not be true, but it really is. Back in 1980 and 81, I went to Indian Art School down in Santa Fe at IAIA, Institute of American Indian Arts. And that place was very haunted. The place had a lot of things that were memories and things that were disturbances. It had been an Indian hospital at one time, and a lot of sickness and death had been there in the Old North Dorm. And I lived in a room with a kid who was gone a lot, and people would come up to me and say, why didn't you open the door? I came up, knocked on the door, and I saw the doorknob kind of rattle, but you never answered it. Or I heard somebody get up off your bed and walk over to the door, and no one answered it. And I wasn't sleeping too well in that room. So I thought about it. And, you know, instead of being scared and whatever, I know that in the old ways, not just Indian, but across the world, people would often paint protectors. And this one here, we call him the Guardian. And he's kind of based upon a Lakota warrior called He-Dog or Low-Dog. And when I painted that, he's real big, like this. I put it in that room, and there was no more problems. And in fact, my father, who has this painting now, he took it with him when he worked on the Cheyenne Reservation, and he said a lot of times he'd see people sitting out in the car looking, because it was hanging on the wall. You could see out from the street, and people would watch it. And some bad people in their house, they would leave when this person was there. And I don't know about you, but I know sometimes it seems like we believe that everything has a spirit, you know. Not just created things, but sometimes things that people make. And this definitely has somebody who visits it and lives in it. This is a piece I did here in Iowa when I was going to school here. It's called Tilth, which is, of course, the composition of soil. And Nuche, which is the ice, of course, being the first part of how Iowa came to be. And Ni, the water, then again eroded the valleys, and Maya and the sun created all the vegetation. And finally, our story is the final 7 feet of soil is our old people. That's who they are. You can't see it too well in this one. You can kind of see faces. And that was made up of our flesh and bones. And when people eat from this land, they're eating really our old people. That's in you when you eat from Iowa. And I'm just wondering sometimes if that person that's going across the land remembers that and realizes that. Now this is another interesting one, Ishchinki Vincent Itaro Duje Wokonke, which means Ishchinki, Vincent, his friend, an ear of corn he gave him. And it's, you know, it's Vincent van Gogh, and everybody talks about in our society the artist being a madman or liminal, kind of on the edge, the periphery, crazy. Well, you know, that's messed up, because in indigenous societies, the artist was part of society, was important, was the person who kept the visuals, kept the people going through ritual, ceremony, the whole thing. And I always thought, if Vincent had been lucky enough to be born in an indigenous society, he would never have gone crazy. He would have just kept doing his art. And of course, ear, since he cut off his ear, it's kind of a play on words. But see, Vincent's doing good. He's happy. He's not mad. He's saying, "Stop teasing me, trickster." And he's got his rabbit ears behind his head, teasing him back. Because teasing goes back and forth. That's health. That's mental balance. That's good. And he would have never went crazy. And see, I remember that I heard when people talked about Vincent's paintings of the blackbirds in the field, that represented his madness. Well, the blackbirds are excluded. They're going away. You see, they're going far away. And in the lodge structure, which also represents the world and the mind, everything's good. Everything's happy. And even today, clowns in our societies, our different societies, are the ones, when things get real desperate, when things get real hard, and there's nobody left who can try to heal somebody from things that are happening to them, mental problems or witchcraft, things like that, the clowns, the tricksters, are the ones who have the best shot at helping people. This one is an interesting story, too. I started painting this one. It was originally called The Promise of Spring. And it was about, the spring and as a young girl, and Postinra, which is what we called the meadowlark, always told us when someone was coming. And Postinra always told you their true name. They couldn't fool you. There were a lot of transformers and tricksters, and good or bad, a lot of bad ones that would come. But Postinra always told you their true name, so you could never be fooled. So this young woman, I was painting her. This is like 20 years I started painting this woman. But I couldn't, she was never done. She was never finished. And then my friend David and his wife Hannah, they had been after me to paint them painting for some time, because Maria Pearson had given a name, and they wanted me to do a painting of a woman, standing two flowers woman. And I was thinking, my friend Norma, she had done paintings from when she was a kid, from a young person down in the Southwest, 50 years later. Because we always think finished. Things are finished, but things are always unfolding. Creation's unfolding. You never know. People say, "How long did this painting take you to do?" It took me 24 years to do. Because I finally added the sunflowers, and that made it work. That brought it together, and I was able to release her to where she needed to go next. So that's how we think of it. And God is like that. In our beliefs, God is like that. God is like the artist, and the painting is like creation. And so, yes, God is above creation. God is the one who made creation. But at the same time, there's something of God in creation at the same time. That painting is me, but it's not me, if you know what I mean. And this is one of the hand-woven sashes from the Aiwi tribe. There's a lot of symbolism there, too, about which side you wear it on, and whether you wear it as a turban and things like that. But I just like looking at it. I like the beauty in it. So I thought I'd inflict it on you, too. One of the common things you'll see that the Iowas and Otos did as one of their traditional art forms was a horsehead mirror. They call it the ardent stallion motif, because when stallions are really going after the mares, their necks kind of arch, and they're really proud, and they're just doing their thing. And the heart line that goes into it, it talks about the life and the power of the animal as well. And, of course, the mirror, that's basically a mirror board. Men use it during the dances to look good, so for their ladies and everything. So, I don't know. That's one of the, when you see this dance mirror, that's a very typical Iowa and Oto art piece. When I was here in landscape architecture, we took a trip on the Upper Iowa River. And this was one of the places in the cliffs, the Upper Iowa River being the place that was first known as the River of Iowas. And that's how the state got its name, was the Upper Iowa River, which later became the Oneota River, which was named after the Oneida people who lived there briefly. And then it became the Upper Iowa River again. So names are very important, but this was a place that was sacred to our old people, so I took a picture a long time ago. This is No Heart. You may have heard about the No Heart map of 1837 when he, this is one of my great uncles, and he drew the map of all the rivers, of all the places, because they were trying to make us sell our land. And he said, how can we sell the place where all our burials, all our old people from times past? We can't do that. This is the proof of, we were here, we went over here, here were the trails, and it didn't do him any good. But that map you can still see, and they actually use that map to link it with certain archaeological sites. And Nashininge, Nasje is heart. You'll see it in Noche Minge and other things, but Nasje is your heart, and Nyinge means none, like no heart of fear. He has no fear. And this was a young woman that was, I think it was either his daughter or his niece. And you never see the women. You see this kind of mark between her eyebrows, sort of like a Hindu kind of a mark. So she was of a higher status family. It was a tattoo that they would put there. Sometimes they'd put 2 marks there. And what I like about this is a very early photograph, 1840s, 1850s, daguerreotype, actually, of you never see women in these photographs. It's always chiefs. It's always men. And I thought it was important to show a woman from that time period, too. So I'm really happy that we're here to talk a little bit, and now I'm done talking one direction, and I'd like to talk with you instead of talking at you. And so if anybody has any questions or things aren't clear to them, please ask me what you want to know about the Ioways. Thank you. He asked if I thought about publishing the artwork to keep the stories alive. There is a book that's University of Iowa Press about the different tribes of Iowa, and it's going to be using some of these drawings. But I'm also working on the stories in a traditional sense. There's a man named Jim Goodtrax who's really kind of been the core of helping to record and preserve our language for a long time, his efforts. And he's working on some of the traditional stories, interlinear translations, things like that. And that's really important. And I think, learning the language is really the core. But the reality is some people aren't going to learn the language, but stories have to live on somehow. So I'm also working on one that actually tells the stories, sort of like the Grimm's fairy tales. You read them in English instead of in German. But there's a lot of conceptions. There's a translation that says, this is the moon that crackles your clothes. It makes no sense in English. But if you look at it, Bithreke dewe, it means that it is so cold, the frostbite burns your clothes black and it crackles them and they fall apart like ice. And so, how do you say that the moon that crackles the clothes literally just doesn't make sense? So we're working on that kind of thing and some of the illustrations that would go with that. The question was about the status of the Iowa language currently. The last fluent speakers who spoke it as children and were raised with it and spoke it what we call fluently, in other words, at ease, back and forth with each other. That last generation died pretty much starting, kind of ending in the late 70s. There were a few people like Art Lightfoot, and they lasted until the early 90s. There's some people who can hear some of it. Myself, I speak maybe at a 5-year-old level. Jim Goodtrax can speak better than I, and there's just very few, maybe half a dozen to 20 or so that know some of it. We are trying hard to keep going. I put some things on YouTube, for example, to kind of introduce people to what it sounds like and things. And Jim Goodtrax is doing a dictionary, kind of an encyclopedia. But that's a different thing than actually using the language, than making it alive and daily. You know, here I am. When I was learning it, I take long walks, and I had nobody to talk to, no highways. So I talked to the clouds. That means the dark clouds are coming. It's going to rain. I want it to rain. So I could only talk to nature. I'd look at a deer and I go, "Haho, haho hitunga, tarika. How are you, grandfather?" And the deer would stop. I talk in English, the deer would go, the deer would stop. One of the neatest things and strangest things that happened to me with the language is I was doing some archaeology in Montana when I was working for the Forest Service. I was walking, I smelled a smell. It was very strong. I thought maybe it was a cow. I kept going, and all of a sudden I hear crashing through brush, and there's 2 little bear cubs running at me. And and there's the mother, and she sees, and she's not happy. And so I slowly begin to back up, and she slowly comes forward, and I start singing a song to her, one of the few songs I knew, and she stops, and she listens to me, and she lets me go. She lets me go. I walk backward respectfully, say, "I'm sorry, we're not doing that. What are you, Roki? Thank you." And the song goes something like, "Hey, hanado, hey, hanado, hey, hanado, hey, hanado, hey, hanado, hey, hanado, hey, hey. Wakande e dagure se dake hanado, hey, hanado." And the song goes, it means Wakanda, God, dagure, whatever you say, ise, dake, that's the way it's going to be. So you're accepting your fate. Whatever you're tasking for pity, winat udata. Winat udata means turn your heart toward me. Nasje is your heart. Turn your heart toward me. I accept whatever you have. Nawo nuwe. My 2 hands, aruseke, they're open. Whatever you want to give me, I'm ready. If you want to kill me, I'm ready for that. If you want to let me go, I'm happy. I bless you. And she let me go. But the language is, if there's nobody to talk to, where does it go? Where does it go? There are people trying, and that's all we can say now.
Obviously, you've done now some genealogical work because you're linking yourself with historic past. But the Iowa traditionally had an oral tradition, and is there now interest among Iowans to do genealogical work? And so, how would you approach it? How do you approach it?
Well, it's been said, only American Indians are only people legally required to keep pedigree, you know. So we actually it's recorded, at least from the time of the agents that set down the first rolls and said who was who and whose part whatever and everything. So the genealogy, a lot of it is, the Indian part of it's pretty clear, at least to that time. Before that, there are some families who know, like for example, before White Cloud, they knew Mahanga was the bristling arrow, was his father, but it only goes back so far. A lot of things, people's memories, you have to realize this. Part of your reason people in Iowa are more grounded in some ways than people say in New York or LA is because you still live where your ancestors are. You still have extended family living nearby. You know, you have a grandma and grandpa that will tell you stories, whether you want to hear them or not. So you have access. And in the land itself, I mean, currently there's a lot of interest on TV about ghosts, haunted places, things like that. But the land itself holds memory, just like us human beings do. Things hold memory. And so when we were sent away from this place 150 years ago, our memories began to fade, and we didn't know who we were in a lot of ways. We didn't know. And so even though the genealogy's there, a lot of the facts, this is taking time, and that's why we need to go back to some of these places, because I truly believe that by spending time at some of these places and sleeping there, that what we need to know we will learn. The places will teach us. And what they don't teach us, that's okay. It's not time for that. Yes? Those kind of projects are very tied to the personalities and the funding that is given to them. When I was here previously, I think I met a couple people before, but I remember Raymond Screws was one of the people that I had interacted with when I was here before. And he had worked real hard trying to do some things. David Gradwell is one of the people who actually worked with the Ioways in Oklahoma to come up with the idea of doing that. And Solomon Kent and Nelson White and some of the other guys came up. And they were really happy. That's really kind of where the connection with the Ioways and stuff began in the early 70s, was those folks, and also Pete Fee coming back after the service and living with his family before he moved back, and then he moved back again. But anyway, those connections are very personality driven. People don't really have, Indian people as a priority sometimes in those sites. They have to fight for that sometimes. Currently, I know that the personnel are really doing really good. And Melissa can really talk about that. But she's doing really, really great job now. I know that since probably early 90s is when I started coming, since I was going to school here and really interacting with people and going down there and helping, once in a while giving some feedback or whatever. But I live way far away, especially since I moved back in 97. I moved far away. I know that there are individuals like Jim Goodtrax and Pat Murphy and some other folks who live closer who kind of go back and forth. And there are certain incidences of celebrations like last fall when the Ioways go there and stuff. But that continuing connection really needs, just like language, it needs continuing active participation. And I think Pete's the only one who still really lives in Iowa, and he's way up by New Albin. So it's kind of, people try, and they're doing a really good job doing some new things. But it's always a struggle. And it's, it is a struggle. Well,
One question. I know shells were very important, and in a lot of your pictures, the men are wearing the shells.
oh yeah, the gorgets, the symbolism. Men were, there were two kind of tutelary connections with the men. With women, it was a lot of the earth. With men, it was the sun and the thunder. Now, that represents the sun, they say, and it represents that as an adult man, the warrior status as part of the sun. And the woodpecker also, the red, on the pipe, the red represents also the sun as well. So that's from ancient times, Mississippian times. Well, thank you, everybody, and I think there's some refreshments back there, and please drive safely and be well, and thank you for coming. Warigroki.
Okay, so thank you everyone for coming, and we'd like to invite you to take part in some cookies and refreshments back there. And also don't forget, if you're interested in receiving information from the Native American student groups, there's a sign-up sheet over on that back table. All right, and we would like to thank Lance once again for being here with us and presenting this lecture. And so we'd like to present you with this blanket, very traditional thing. So thank you once again.
Thank you.